Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going exploring the world of corn snake genetics.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, specifically, we're looking at the amelanistic gene,
Okay.
and we're using this excerpt from History of the Amelanistic Gene in Corn Snakes by Brian Lobsher.
Okay.
And just going through it, and it's a really fascinating story because it's not just about,
Yeah.
like a snake changing color or something like that. It's really about how this single mutation that was found in the wild kind of revolutionized the entire reptile breeding industry
Yeah, for sure.
and led to the creation of, all these new morphs that we see today. And even, breeders like Bill and Kathy Love became these central figures in this whole genetic revolution. So,
Yeah, it's amazing how something that, starts as this rare thing in nature
right.
becomes like the foundation for a whole industry.
Exactly. And it all began with, these handful of snakes that were topping up in the wild with this really, striking absence of melanin. And the crazy thing is, it wasn't just like a scientific curiosity. Right.
These snakes were like highly sought after by early collectors.
Oh, yeah, you can see why. I mean, melanin is what gives, corn snakes their typical camouflage pattern.
Right.
So you take that away and you're left with these vibrant reds and oranges and whites.
Oh.
So I guess a total transformation.
Yeah, it's like nature's art project.
Yeah, exactly.
But how did breeders in like the 60s and 70s, go from just like admiring these snakes to actually like understanding how the amelanistic gene worked?
Well, that's where things get kind of scientific,
Okay.
Breeders, they start experimenting with this thing called selective breeding.
Right.
And they're very meticulously recording all their results.
Okay.
And so without even necessarily realizing it, they were piecing together this concept of Mendelian recessive inheritance.
So like two normal-looking snakes
Yeah.
could still carry this hidden gene,
Exactly.
and their babies could end up with these amelanistic traits.
Exactly. And that's huge. Understanding
Ah.
how these traits are passed down.
It totally changes the game.
Yeah.
Instead of it just being this random chance thing, now breeders can kind of predict and manipulate how their snakes are going to look.
So this is all happening right around the time that the corn snake breeding was really taking off in the 70s and 80s.
You got corn snakes were already becoming popular.
Yeah.
Manageable size, pretty docile.
Easy to care for.
Yeah, easy to care for. But then this amelanistic gene comes along.
Right.
And then they figure out the genetics, and it just sends the whole reptile breeding world into overdrive.
Like it was a secret code that they just unlocked.
Yeah.
And now they can make all these crazy color variations.
More than just potential. I mean, it was really the beginning of this like morph explosion.
Wow.
Where people were like, okay, let's intentionally combine the amelanistic gene with other mutations and see what happens.
Yeah, and this is where breeders like Bill and Kathy Love kind of enter the picture, right? They weren't just breeding amelanistic corn snakes. I mean, they were really pioneers in this whole field.
Yeah, their influence was huge, and it wasn't just about producing pretty snakes. They really meticulously documented everything they did.
Wow.
And they shared all that knowledge and their techniques with everyone.
So they're really kind of helping establish these standards and best practices.
Yeah, for the whole field.
For the whole field.
Yeah.
Wow. So did they run into any, challenges that shaped how breeding is done today?
Well, one of their big things was genetic diversity.
Okay.
Early on, everyone was focused on just making as many crazy morphs as possible.
Right.
But sometimes they kind of overlooked the risks of inbreeding.
Inbreeding. So what do you mean by that? What are the implications of that?
Well, if you breed snakes that are too closely related, you risk amplifying not just the good traits, but also, hidden genetic problems.
Oh, so it can be bad for their health.
Exactly. And Bill and Kathy Love were some of the first to recognize this.
Okay.
And they really advocated for this thing called outcrossing, which is basically breeding unrelated snakes to introduce new genes and, reduce those health risks.
So they were really thinking about the long-term health of these snakes.
Absolutely. It was about more than just making pretty colors.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure these snakes were thriving.
It's like they were, ahead of their time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. They really set the stage for, more responsible breeding practices today.
So their work really had this ripple effect,
Oh, yeah, big time. As people started understanding genetics better, they started experimenting with even more complex combinations, using that amelanistic gene as this foundation to create all sorts of colors and patterns.
Yeah, it's like they have this blank canvas and like a set of genetic paints and they can just go crazy.
Exactly.
What are some of the coolest morphs that came out of that whole era?
Oh, man, so many good ones. One that comes to mind is the snow corn snake.
Okay.
So that one combines the amelanistic gene with another gene called the anarthristic gene.
An erythristic, what is that?
Yeah, so that one basically eliminates red pigments. So you end up with this snake that's almost entirely white, or like a pale pink, with maybe just little hints of yellow.
So you can really control the color like that.
Yeah, pretty amazing, huh?
Did they ever try, like, combining genes from different species?
They did, and that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
So there's this morph called the creamsicle corn snake.
Creamsicle, I love that name.
Yeah, right? So it gets that like vibrant orange and white
Okay.
from a combination of the melanistic gene and some genetic influence from Great Plains rat snakes.
Wait, so they're like crossing different species?
Yeah, it's called hybridization,
Yeah.
but it's all very controlled and selective.
Okay.
Remember, corn snakes and Great Plains rat snakes are pretty closely related.
Right.
So by carefully selecting individuals with the traits they want, and then breeding them over multiple generations,
Okay.
they were able to introduce those color characteristics from the rat snake into the corn snake line.
That's incredible. So you're not just like messing with genes within a species. You can actually like borrow traits from other species.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It shows you how diverse and how much potential there is in that reptile genome.
Yeah, and that a melanistic gene just kind of opens up all these possibilities.
Exactly. It's like this blank slate for color.
It makes you wonder what else they could do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Another cool one is the sunglow corn snake.
Sunglow?
So that one combines the melanistic gene with the hypomelanistic gene.
Hypomelanistic, so less melanin, I'm guessing?
Exactly. It reduces the amount of melanin, but it doesn't completely eliminate it.
Okay, so it's like a diluted effect.
Yeah, so sunglows usually have this like really bright, almost glowing orange or red base color.
Okay.
And then because there's still a little bit of melanin, you might see some subtle patterns or markings in like tan or light brown.
Wow, so it's like fiery.
Yeah, exactly.
These combinations are just mind-blowing. It's like they're artists using genetics as their paint.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? But, there were definitely some lessons learned along the way.
Oh, bet. What kind of things?
Well, early on, the focus was mainly on looks.
Right.
And sometimes that meant overlooking, the impact on the snake's health.
Right, of course.
But over time, people became more aware of, responsible breeding.
So it was a gradual shift.
Yeah, for sure. Breeders started paying more attention to things like temperament and disease resistance, not just color and pattern.
Right, because a beautiful snake that's always sick is not really what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's got to be healthy and well-adjusted.
So the quest for the perfect morph, it's like this whole journey.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Lots of trial and error and a lot of learning about genetics.
And ethics, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's still going on today.
It's crazy to think that all this started with, one little mutation in the wild.
Yeah, it really shows you the power of observation.
And experimentation.
And just a love for these animals.
So are today's melanistic corn snakes like exactly the same as the ones they found in the wild?
That's a good question. And the answer is not really.
Okay, how so?
Well, all those years of selective breeding have actually led to even more vibrant colors. Yeah, in a lot of cases, the captive snakes are actually more colorful than their wild counterparts.
So the ones we see in pet stores today could be even brighter than the originals.
Yeah, exactly. Breeders have been very carefully selecting the snakes with the best traits.
Like the brightest reds and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And breeding them together over and over again.
So it's like they've been refining this masterpiece.
Exactly. It just shows you how much potential there is in that corn snake genome.
But that also comes with responsibility, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the ethics of breeding, but there's also the question of, the long-term impact of creating these really specialized morphs.
Like what kind of impact?
Well, if everyone just focuses on a few popular morphs,
right,
it could actually reduce the overall genetic diversity.
Okay.
And that could make the species more vulnerable to disease or, changes in the environment.
So it's like a balancing act.
Yeah, exactly. You want to push the boundaries and see what's possible.
Right.
But you also got to make sure you're protecting the species as a whole.
It's amazing how much has happened just from that one mutation.
Yeah, it really is. It's been a journey of, color and knowledge and ethical awareness.
Yeah, it really is mind-boggling to think about.
Right.
Like, if we can create all this variety in corn snakes, what about other species?
I mean, yeah, the possibilities are kind of crazy. Like, imagine you could enhance the colors of, like, fish or birds.
Or even mammals.
Right, like you could have dogs with, these crazy, vibrant coats that we've never seen before.
Oh, or glowing fish for aquarium.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, as we get into this kind of stuff, we have to be really careful.
You're right. It's easy to get excited about, what we can do.
Yeah.
But we also have to think about what we should do.
Exactly. We have to ask some tough questions.
What kind of questions?
Well, like, are we just focusing on making things look cool?
Right.
Or are we actually considering the well-being of these animals?
Yeah. Are we messing with natural ecosystems?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
If we start introducing genetically modified creatures into the wild...
It's a tough balance, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Like, we want to explore and see what's possible, but we don't want to cause harm.
Absolutely. And it's not just up to scientists and breeders to figure this out.
Right.
It's a conversation that we all need to have as a society.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the amelanistic gene,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear that this little mutation has had a huge impact.
It really has.
I mean, it's changed the way we think about genetics. And it's opened up all these new possibilities.
But it's also given us some big ethical questions to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like a reminder that scientific progress has to go hand in hand with,
with responsibility.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this fascinating journey.
It's been fun.
Into the world of the amelanistic gene.
Yeah.
We hope you learned something new and maybe even gained a new perspective on, the connection between science and nature and ethics.
Absolutely.
So until next time, keep exploring.
Keep learning.